This is a production of Gordon College's Scott Radio.
Scott Radio.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Ben Schneider Show. My guest today is Vida's Director of Education and Program Development, Nate Hausman. Nate, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, have you ever been in here before?
Never. This is my first time.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's, pretty nice little place you guys got here.
Yeah, we do a lot with a little, so it's it's a good production that we've got going on here. Well, yeah, Nate, so I've been to preseason camp a couple times. I've talked to you here and there, but I don't know you too well, so I really just want to get to know you a little bit better. I know you're a runner, which is something that we have in common. I know you do a lot of great work with Vida, but I just kind of want to start from the very beginning. Where did you grow up? What got you into running? And what brought you to Gordon?
Sure. I grew up in western New York, a little town called Olean, so south of Buffalo a bit, and I mainly grew up playing soccer. That was my big thing, and never ran competitively. It was purely doing things on the soccer field. And
There's a lot of running involved.
There was a lot of running involved there, yeah. So my junior year of high school, I decided to join the track team merely as a way to stay in shape for soccer, and really enjoyed it. I ran the 400 and 800, so kept the distances pretty short, similar to what the soccer field would do well with. And then it wasn't until getting to Gordon that I actually started to run longer distances. How did I get to Gordon? Boy, it was late in my senior year. I was looking at all Christian schools, and I had looked at Gordon briefly early on in my search, but at first glance, they didn't have what I wanted to major in, or at least I didn't think they did. I was looking for something along athletic training, physical training, something along those lines. And the major at the time, now it's the kinesiology department, but at the time it was called movement science. And I glanced right over it and didn't think anything about it. I have an uncle who lives out in Rockport, and he had done some work with Gordon, and he did a little bit more digging for me and found out that the movement science department was exactly what I was looking for. So it came out. Gordon students were in finals, at that time. So it was right. I didn't get to really experience a visit day. Was here for about 6 hours, and on the flight back home to Buffalo, decided this is where I wanted to go.
So these are like finals for spring semester?
Finals for spring
so
semester.
This is like last minute.
It was like very last minute, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I had looked at, I was very close to going to Taylor out in Indiana, and they had a really good soccer program that I wanted to play for, and had tried out and made the team and was ready to play for them.
So what caused the last minute?
It really was my uncle stepping in saying, "Nate, I think you should give Gordon a second glance." And he was pretty persistent, he did a lot of consulting with actually the last time, one of the last big campaigns Gordon ran, the Salt and Light campaign, he was one of the chief consultants on it. So he knew Gordon really well and thought that I would enjoy being out here. So it was pretty persistent in at least having me to come take a look at it. And it really was those few hours on campus that convinced me this is where I wanted to go.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, we have a really good soccer team right now.
Uh-huh.
Did you look at the soccer program at all when
I did?
You were coming
Yeah. I met with the coach and talked with them and was pretty seriously considering playing for them. And it was actually after that meeting with the former coach that I decided I'm not quite sure this is the style of play that kind of fits who I am. And it seemed to be a pretty big shift from what I was used to, and I did not have a good feeling about it, and decided I was gonna give it up. So it was actually shortly after that my roommate, my freshman year, called me after finding out we were going to live together, and he was a runner, and he was going to run for the cross country team, and I had told him that I was not going to play soccer, and he said, "Well, you should try out for the cross country team." And at that point, I had no idea how long the races were, nothing. I knew nothing about cross country, but thought, well, I've run something before. I could maybe give it a go. So
Was the 800 the longest you'd done up to
800.
that point?
I did. I raced the mile once
Okay.
in high school, and that was only because we were competing against a team we knew we were going to win. So the coach just put us in different events to try something different. So that was my longest my longest run I had ever done, or longest race I had ever done.
How long did it take you to adjust to the 8K distance?
I'd say probably by the end of my freshman season, I felt pretty comfortable. I think as I got into it more and did more training, I think I quickly learned that my body was built pretty well for the distance running, and I adapted, I think, pretty quick. Yep.
Yeah. Do you have any meets that you remember that stand out that you had a really good performance in, or?
Oh boy, we not necessarily one that I had a good performance. I just remember it was a brutal. Most folks would know cross country as we were talking a little bit about being on the grass or on the trails. It's like really nice. It's a great thing about the sport is that you get out into the wilderness a little bit, and you're not stuck onto the confines of a field or a court. But we went down and raced against Mass Maritime, which was down on the Cape, basically on the Cape, and it was all along kind of a channel, a canal of sorts, and just pure pavement. We basically ran 2.5 miles down on a sidewalk, turned around and ran 2.5 miles back, and that was their cross-country course, and it was horrible. So hot that day and just so boring. The out and back course, then if I wasn't one of the top runners, so you get to see all the people in front of you heading back to the finish line as I'm still making my way out to the turnaround time. So yeah, it was one of those races I remember leaving thinking, thank goodness that one's done.
So if it was all like pavement and a surface like that, did you do it in spikes, or did you?
No, we ran just in our
regular
kind of
trainers?
flats. Yeah, yep, trainers. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that being not the most pleasant experience.
No, not very fun race at all.
Yeah. So, what did the program look like when you were a part of it?
Cross-country program?
Yeah.
It was pretty small. I don't remember exactly how many people we had my freshman year, but there was definitely weeks that we wondered, could we field a full team of 5 just to score, let alone 7 that would be kind of like the normal running crew. And there was times that if we had an injury or two, it became a struggle for us. So we had my freshman year, I remember consistently I feel like we had under 10 people. Maybe it was right around 10. It was not a very big team. But because of that, it was a very close-knit team that we all got to know each other really, really well. The coach at the time, he was a really pretty low-key guy, and he was a great coach. Really did well with the community building of the team. So, and those guys, we ran together all 4 years, and it was a really pretty tight-knit group.
Did you do track as well?
We didn't have track.
Oh, really?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not until the Bennett Center was relatively new, so our indoor training was really, we had to be on the track above the basketball courts there, which is pretty horrible to do.
Do you know when the
training.
track team actually started?
So I do. It was my junior year. Was the first time. Yeah, we started a track club at that time.
All right.
So we weren't actually allowed to compete at some of the races, but we'd go to other club meets. And then my senior year, which is really kind of crazy to think about, I think that's when we started to compete a little bit more at some of the D3 meets. Yeah. So still pretty small, and we were similar to you guys. I guess now you get the track to train on, but we had to do all of our training on the road or indoors on the walking track here at Gordon, and it really was the only time we got to run on a track was at the meets because we didn't have a track at the time.
Sure, yeah.
Yep.
What events did you do and
For the track,
track.
I was back to the 800.
So back to that mid distance.
Yeah,
stuff?
that was kind of just the coach of the time. We did not have enough people to field all events by any. We had no throwers, we had no jumpers. It was only runners who was competing. So we were still a pretty small program at that time, and there was enough of us that were coming from that middle distance background that we also then put together a 4x8 team. I might have done the 400 here or there, but I feel like it was mainly the 800 and the 4x8 I remember doing.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was looking at your profile here on the Gordon website trying to get ready for the show, and something I didn't know, you're a 3-time Boston Marathon qualifier.
Yeah.
So I guess I know you weren't much of a distance guy in high school. Obviously, you picked it up later. How did you get inspired to train for that, and what goes into that race? Because I know it's a huge deal.
It is a huge deal. It was not my first marathon. My very first one was Chicago, and that I did when I was in grad school. It was something, I was out going to Wheaton for grad school, and I was up at their camp for the first half of my degree and was really missing competing. And there was a few other staff members that were also very good college runners on staff and up at the camp. So we would run together a lot, and that kind of got me motivated to sign up for a race. And I just got the crazy idea in my mind that might as well go do Chicago. So that was my very first one. So that was 2001 is when I ran Chicago. And was just a fun thing to do while in grad school. So did that, and then a number of years afterwards, I did Philadelphia, and that's the one that I finally that I qualified to run Boston. However, I really only qualified technically I only qualified to run Boston twice. My first time running Boston was after doing Philly, and I missed it by seconds. So I did some digging, and I found out how to contact the race director of the Boston Marathon and reached out to him, told him a little bit about my story and passion for running and what happened in Philadelphia, and convinced him to let me in. And he gave me a bib to run Boston that year. So I told him that I would work hard to try to run a qualifying time in that race to get in fully the next year, and I did. I was able to do that. So, yeah.
What is the qualifying time? Or
back then, it was 3 hours and 10 minutes for my age group. A handful of years ago, because Boston, you asked why did I want to run Boston, and it's, there's a lot of history around that race. Having lived in Boston, it was one of those things that I really wanted to do. And as a runner, I feel like it's one of the events that everyone dreams about participating in, kind of like the World Series for runners. So, and there was a very specific goal that you had to reach in order to get to run it. So there's a little bit of that elitist part of it, unless you can also raise money and run the race if you're raising money for a nonprofit. But I think the allure of knowing I can only run this if I qualify to get in was a big draw. So that was for me one of the big reasons of wanting to do it.
Yeah. What does the atmosphere feel like when you're on the line there?
It's pretty exciting, and you're surrounded by, I think the year I did it, there was 36,000 people, something crazy. So you're just, that race is a little different. Oh yeah, you had asked about qualifying time. Now it's gotten so competitive, and so many people want to do it that they've made the times and the qualifying much, much harder to get into now. And you can run a qualifying time, and you're not necessarily guaranteed a spot. But the atmosphere, it's just, there's tons of excitement as you're down at the starting line at Hopkinton. That town is so much of the town during April revolves around the marathon, and everyone there, there's a good story to why they're doing it. And it's not just a Saturday 5K that you're going to run. People have put a lot of work into getting to the race, number one, because they had to qualify, or they've had to raise a good amount of money to get a bib. And then all those people, they've then had to train to do the marathon again. You have to train to do a marathon before, and then you qualify, and now you got to train all over again. So it's a huge camaraderie thing, I think. Just everyone there is super excited about getting to do that journey into Boston. And then the race itself, you just go, I think they say there's close to 1 million people along the course that you run by, and it's just a lot of folks encouraging you on. So it's very fun.
Yeah. So if there's 36,000 people, like, I've got to imagine it takes a long time just to get to the start line, right?
It does.
So,
however, they often will, your bib correlates to your qualifying time, so then you get placed. So for me, running around a 3-hour and 10-minute marathon, everyone around me ran a similar qualifying time. So theoretically, the people who are before me should be faster runners than I would be. And running, there's a lot of people who run, the majority of folks would run slower than like a 3-hour marathon. There's not, running under a 3-hour marathon is pretty fast. So my bracket, I think there was only maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people ahead of me, but then there was 30,000 in back of us. So it took those people, I think it takes them good 10-15 minutes just to get to the starting line, and it only took us maybe a minute. Yeah, not very long.
yeah, I've got to think, like, if you're one of those people in the back, like, because when we run our cross country meets, we're warming up like all the way to the end until the gun goes off.
Yeah.
So if you got to stand there and just wait to jog up to the line.
Yeah, those people, they're also, they might be running a 4.5 hour marathon. So as opposed to you all going off the line and hitting it hard right away, they are not running at a blistering pace by any means.
Sure.
It's probably your warm-up pace is what they're running. So they wouldn't need to do a ton of warming up. It's the nice thing about the marathon is that unless you're an elite athlete, you can kind of stand up and off you go because you're not running super fast.
Yeah. So what was your major? What did you come into Gordon intending to study and do with your career?
Well, like I said, I was thinking about doing athletic training, so I started off as a movement science major and did that for a year. Took anatomy and physiology, and after all those classes in the labs, I realized I was not cut out for as much of the science. So it was during my second semester of my freshman year that I took introduction to rec and leisure studies class. And so back now at rec, sport and wellness, I took that class and really, really enjoyed it and decided to change my majors at the end of my freshman year. But that was right before I was going on Vida as a student. So since I committed to Gordon so late, I wanted to go on Vida before my freshman year, but all the spots were already filled up. So I had to go in May at the end of my freshman year. And after that rec class, I was the teacher of that class. She suggested that I go talk to Rich Obenchain and go hear a little bit more about the outdoor education program. So I went down to his office. This is one thing. I don't remember the conversation itself, but I remember walking down to his office, which was in the basement of Frost, going in, talking to him. He always had his golden retriever with him, so I remember the golden retriever was there. We talked for about a half an hour, and I walked out of the office, and I remember thinking, oh gosh, he just got me to sign up to be an outdoor education minor student, and I haven't even done La Vida yet. So I had no idea if I enjoyed the outdoor stuff. I knew I liked being outdoors, but the camping and backpacking, any of that outdoor education stuff, I had no experience with at all. And he was kind of a smooth talker that could sell anybody just about anything. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you remember from your freshman trip?
It was very cold, so it was one of those May trips that the weather was pretty wretched. So it was a pretty, back then the May trip was pretty big. There was probably 80 to 90 students out on the trip. And I was on one of the trips that was in the High Peaks region. So it's a spot that we don't go very often now, just because the regulations are a little bit more difficult to deal with for us who are running programs. So La Vida back then, we went to the High Peaks a lot. So great thing with the High Peaks is really good views. It's the big mountains, but it's the area that the snow lingers. So May up in the Adirondacks can be pretty cold. And I remember my group was supposed to summit Mount Marcy, and we started to make our way up Mount Marcy and had to turn around because the snow was too deep, and we were just post-holing in snow. So we turned around and went back to another campsite and had to change up our itinerary because of that. And I just remember it was very wet. It was a very wet and cold trip. So it was not a trip that you would look back on and think, that was a lot of fun. I'd like to go out there and do that all over again. It was pretty horrible weather. We did not see the sun very often at all.
Yeah. Well, I guess clearly you took something positive away from
something
it.
happened, yeah, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get into that soon. But I wanted to ask before that. You got your bachelor's from Gordon, obviously.
I did. Yep. Yep.
Then you got your master's from Wheaton.
From Wheaton.
So
yep.
what brought you back out there?
Wheaton's has a camp called Honey Rock, and one of the guys who was teaching up at Honey Rock at the time, his name was Ken Kalish, and Ken was an old Outward Bound instructor and Christian, and his dissertation was a book called The Role of the Instructor in the Outward Bound Process, and that was a book, one of our textbooks that we used in one of our outdoor education classes here at Gordon. So I knew about Ken. We had read his dissertation and kind of his thoughts, and Rich at the time suggested that maybe I pursue some more studies after Gordon, and I gave that a little bit more thought and looked around for different outdoor education options, and Wheaton was a really good one. So the degree was more focused on camp ministry and leadership. So I spent 12 months of my master's, the first half of my time up at their camp, and professors would come up and teach. We do kind of intensive classes, and then it was a really good deal on their part that we were paying to be there, and we essentially became the staff, and then we would take classes a couple days a week, and then we would essentially put into practice what we were learning in the classroom. So different facilitation things. And we get to work with all the different groups going through the camp throughout the entire year, and that was a great experience. And then I did two semesters down on Wheaton's campus to finish my degree.
Yeah. So then, obviously, you're back here now.
Yeah.
So you do La Vida your freshman year.
Yep.
What was your involvement with it the rest of your time at Gordon, and how
yep.
did you end up coming back?
Yeah, so like I said, I declared I was a Rec and Leisure Studies major, and then I had a concentration in outdoor education. At the end of my sophomore year, I added a psychology major as well, and it was then that I just really realized that I loved working with people and having a role in their development as humans. And as Christians. So that's when I decided I really wanted to pursue pursue the studies a little bit more. So at my sophomore year, I led a Vida trip just as a student, as a Sherpa, and then after that summer, I worked the adventure camp that's down here on campus, and I think it was the second year that the adventure camp ever ran. So pretty small. There's only 3 of us on staff, and now it's huge. So I did that, and then after my junior and senior years, I worked full summers up at the base camp as a Sherpa leading trips those summers. When I went out to Wheaton, I kept in touch with Rich and a couple of the other guys in the office. Just they became good friends, and I had realized that keeping those connections would be a good thing. So I was wrapping up my master's, and Rich was in need of Sherpas for the May trip. So that was 2002. So I had told him I would come back and work that trip. Did that, and throughout the process of that last semester at Wheaton, they then needed someone to stay up for the summer to work at the base camp, and I did that, and that was essentially kind of being the assistant director. The director at the time, he was actually looking to go back to get his master's so he could start teaching again in elementary school math. So he did that, and it just, the timing worked out really well, and I was offered the job full time at the end of that summer back.
So what is your role today?
Today, right now, my title is the Director of Education and Program Development. That very well could be changing here pretty soon. That role, it doesn't tell you, the title doesn't really tell you too much of what I do. So I will most likely become the Director of Outdoor Education. So I oversee the outdoor education core requirement here at Gordon. So I run all the Vida programming up in the Adirondacks, but then I oversee the Discovery program. So anything that the Gordon student has to do here to fulfill their requirement, that's a program I oversee. And then I also teach the outdoor education classes. So there used to be the wild semester. Used to be around here on campus, and that was a semester-long outdoor education program that students could take 4 classes in outdoor ed, and that we don't have that program anymore, but we still tried to keep the classes alive. So I've been teaching this semester. It's my third class that I've taught over the last 3 semesters. Yep.
So over the summer, I guess you're living on the base camp for the whole 4 months?
Yeah, we get to, this last summer was my 20th summer up at the base camp. So every May we pack up, my wife and I, and now our daughter, we pack her up, and up to the Adirondacks we go, and we leave our house here. We rent that out to students and say goodbye to Gloucester and the Gordon campus, and we move up to the Adirondacks and are there until the end of August. So it's pretty sweet gig.
Yeah. So you have a family now.
Yep.
I guess your daughter was just born.
She was
recently?
born, back in February. So
Wow.
She's just about to turn 9 months in a couple of days.
What's that experience been like?
It's been wonderful. Yeah, I love being a dad, and it's been fun to have. It was a blast to have her up at the base camp with us this summer. Really fun to see the staff kind of welcome her into the Vida fold, and they really loved on her a lot. So it was, we didn't know how it was going to go. We knew that bringing a newborn up there was going to be a bit of a challenge, but it went very, very well. So we're excited to get her back up there this next year.
So it's been a rewarding experience.
It's been very
have
rewarding.
Your family there with
Oh
you.
yeah, yep. And Amber, my wife, we met through Vida, and she now works in the office as well. So that's a huge blessing to get to do. We get to spend a lot of time together, and she gets to do work here at the office, and then we both get to go up to the base camp and do the ministry together up there. So pretty special that we get to do that.
How many times do you go to Donnelly's over the
boy.
course of the summer?
Well, I've toned it back as Donnelly's prices have been inflated over the years. It's put a bigger hit on my wallet. So once I realized that I was spending a couple $100s a summer on Donnelly's ice cream, I felt like I had to curb my spending a little bit. So I think my record, I eclipsed 50 cones one summer.
Yeah. Taylor Bradford actually wrote a
Taylor
blog post.
did. Yes.
And she quoted you as saying, "I challenge anyone to eat more than 50 Donnelly's ice cream cones as I have done in one summer."
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was. Just like the marathon, there was something about that. I had a goal in mind, and I thought I'm gonna work pretty hard to get this, and why not just lick it away?
You have a favorite flavor?
Let's see. Mondays are nut surprise days at Donnelly's, and it's typically a pretty rewarding day to visit the little ice cream shack. So peanut butter is a really good one. Just recently, Mr. Donnelly has started to, on Saturdays, it's normally all flavors twisted with vanilla, and you get one flavor a day.
Sure.
Twisted with vanilla. But Mr. Donnelly, in his older age, got a little crazy, and on Saturdays he created, I think he calls it Silly Saturdays. So he twists multiple flavors together. So, this last year he had chocolate and mint, or chocolate and peanut butter was just a wonderful one. Irish cream and coffee is another really good flavor. Lemon, blueberry, pineapple. Oh gosh, they're really. I'm not a big fan of the strawberry, but other than that, I will. I'll take part in just about any of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you mentioned Rich briefly.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did he have on your life?
Yeah, pretty influential. So he's the guy who introduced me to outdoor education, and he and I we had done trips together. We had been out on backpacking trips together. So I've spent time with him in the wilderness. I was his intern for a year as a student. He and we would go and do promotional trips together, so I got to see him sell the program and kind of tell his story and see him get really passionate about that. We traveled just all over the place together and we built cabins together, we roofed together, we've cut wood together, we did so much together. So he was a guy who, we have different approaches to how we work. For sure, we're both hard workers, but I'm a pretty organized guy, and he was not always that. So, in my approach to doing some things, he and I clashed a bit here or there, but we knew that was we were still trying to accomplish the same thing. So, it's a huge role in just what I do with my life and with my life's work of La Vida now. I think I can point so much of that to him. So it's been tough to not have him around anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course it's very sad and unfortunate.
Yeah.
His passing this summer. But
yep.
How have you all in the program dealt with that and kind of? I mean, I'm sure nobody can replace Rich.
No.
With everything that he did.
No.
For the program. But have you taken on more responsibilities?
I have. That's one of the reasons I oversee Discovery now is because of that. It was.
Rich. I remember when I did Discovery, he was listed as my professor. Yep, so that was the one time I met him. Briefly.
Yep. So he was on his way to retirement, reluctantly. Those who knew him, he was just gonna keep working. So. The plan was that I was going to take over Discovery anyway, and it was going to be a bit of a kind of a gradual transition process. So this year, he and I were going to work together to do that a little bit more. But with his passing, then I fully took on the Discovery program, so that definitely increased my workload pretty dramatically. And you're right, yeah, no one could replace him for sure. So his legacy lives on, though. We were cleaning out office today and coming across all sorts of relics and things that he has held on to for who knows how many years.
Yeah, so you've been a part of this program for over 2 decades now in one way or another. How has it evolved since your first trip as a freshman?
I would say, from what I remember now, there's a lot more intentionality behind the curriculum and the planning, kind of the program part of it. And there's a lot more thought that goes into the kind of spiritual growth side of it. I don't specifically remember having a journal that was issued to me, but now that's a big thing. We give out a big, Discovery gets those as well, a big book of readings and space for journaling. So I remember journaling was a part of what we used to do, but I don't feel like it was nearly as big of a part as it is now. I think now we see with just the role of the changing technology in the world. That was back in the late 90s, mid 90s. Cell phones were around. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, I guess you didn't have a temptation of one of these,
no,
right?
No one had those things. So that was just something you didn't have to think about. So giving up your watch back then was way more of a significant ask than giving up your phone is today. So we've had, I'd say, as that culture and just teen culture in general has changed as a result of the influence of technology today, we've had to really adapt our approach to what we do, realizing that going into the woods, it's a much bigger ask now for kids, and we've had to kind of tweak how we approach things to do that, so they don't get so nervous about leaving their phones for 2 weeks.
Yeah. How about the college in general? How have you seen that evolve in the time that you've been here as a student to where you are now?
Yeah, most of the building that has happened has really been in my tenure here. When I got here, the Bennett Center was being dedicated, so that it had just gotten built and was being used for the first time. And from that point forward, all the dorms up on the hill were built. Barrington was built. Phillips was built. Chase was built. Ken Olson was built. The track was built. I've been here during that entire time. So my 4 years at Gordon, it just felt like there was always construction. And I feel like that in the early 2000s, it just seems like there was always major construction going on around campus. And we haven't had that in a while. So I think that's just physically, that's one of the big things I've seen. I think the campus has become, for the students, I think there's a lot more, even stuff like this, Scott Radio, a lot like the club offerings and the amount of off-campus programming available to you all, just special opportunities that you all have. That you could do that. You could study abroad and do some of that stuff when I was a student, but there was nowhere near the amount of offerings that you all, extracurricular offerings that you all have. I feel like that's increased dramatically over the last 15, 20 years. And then I think Gordon's, it's become a much more diverse campus as well.
Sure, yeah.
I feel like there's been a lot of intentionality behind that as well. And I've noticed that, especially in the last probably 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, it amazes me how many students we have,
Yep.
like from the West Coast, but then
Yep.
also thinking internationally.
Yep. For
Yeah.
sure. That was definitely not the case pre-2000. Yeah.
Yeah. So, where do you see yourself in the future down the road? Is this something you want to keep doing for a long time, or?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. How long will I stay with La Vida? It's scary now how many people associate the program with me and vice versa. So so many times when I get together with friends, there's a pretty good possibility that those friendships were formed through La Vida. So conversation naturally goes to La Vida. It's hard for me to find people who don't know me outside of that context. So I've thought a bit about that. What else would I do? And I at this point in time, I don't feel like I've been led to think down that road too much. So at least at this point in time, for the foreseeable future, I think we're gonna stick with this. I think adding on discovery this year has been a big challenge for me. I've had to eat some of my own teaching, I would have to say, and stepping outside of my comfort zone and taking on a totally new program for me and learning. I've had to learn a lot, and so just a lot. My days are very different now, and that's been stretching for me. I feel like I got into a pretty good routine, and that routine was comfortable for me for many years, and I think adding a new program and teaching has really kind of shifted that a little bit, and that's been a good thing for me as I reflect back. That's been a good thing. So I don't know how long we'll be up in the Adirondacks now with Evelyn around. She's not even one yet, so we've got a few years until school gets into the picture, but I would say probably once she gets plugged in and starts to make some local friends, I would have a feeling that removing her from those local connections might be a little bit more difficult for us. So yeah, I don't think we're going to be up in New York indefinitely, but I would say at least with La Vida, we're not planning to leave.
Do you have a vision for how you can grow the program and take that next step?
Well, it's always trying to think through how to keep the base camp alive and thriving, and that for me right now is a matter of trying to identify different church groups. It's not just Gordon students who go. During the rest of the summer, we have church groups and different parachurch organizations who come use the base camp, and we're finding that it's harder and harder to get people to sign up for those trips. Gordon, it's nice because every student, they have to decide, am I going to do La Vida or Discovery? So it's a kind of a captured audience in many respects. But for about 50% of our people who do the trips, we have to go out and get them to sign up, and it's becoming a hard sell. So, and my vision now is trying to figure out, we're really trying to push for some of the groups to sign up who might not have the opportunity to do this. So our big right now is we're trying to raise a lot of money for financial assistance for people. So this last year we had a group from inner city Boston who came up and did a trip, and great. We had a donor, very generous person who paid for their entire trip and gave them the opportunity to come and do La Vida. And now they want to come back this next summer, and do it again. And it was something that those kids had never, ever experienced anything like it. And it was a very hard experience for them, but something that the youth pastor of that church realized it was pretty critical for their growth and development. So he bought in totally. So that's kind of our vision now, is to identify more of those populations who can come and experience the program.
Yeah. So if an incoming freshman came to you and said, should I choose to do La Vida or should I choose to do Discovery? Which one would you suggest and why?
I would probably point them to La Vida pretty quickly, yeah. And I would tell them to do it in August. I think doing that trip, maybe not necessarily in August, sometime before the summer before they step foot on campus. And that's the program really was designed to be that introduction to Gordon's campus. So much of the research that has been done points to that those type of experiences, they provide a student with a known community of friends who then it makes that transition into college life so much easier because they have people who know them really well, and they feel comfortable with this group of 9 other people who they were in the woods with for 12 days, and they know they can trust them, and they know that when they walk into dinner, they have a familiar face they can sit down with. So there's so much of that transition process into college that is eased because you have a group of friends already. So we've seen that time and time again, that students who do La Vida prior to starting orientation, they're a few steps ahead of everybody else because they've done that trip and they already have a core group of friends.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
All right, Nate. Well, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story and telling me a little bit more about the program.
You bet, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been great to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week's show. If you're listening live, stay tuned. Will Lott's Fresh Take is coming at you on the other side of this break. And as for me, we'll see you next week. Have a good night, everybody.